All right, so this video that we are looking at now is going to be an overview of the main musical eras in the history of classical Western music. So we're going to go quickly through those. This will likely be the longest video that you'll be required to watch for these first 2 weeks. So how it's going to go is, as I present these musical eras, musical time periods, I want you to pay attention to what you think you might enjoy the most doing some research. So I have posted a Google Classroom already, a assignment that you're going to write. It's essentially another choir paper, similar to what we did last fall with our concert. And you're going to choose a time period that I talk about now, and then choose a composer from that time period. So I have a prescribed list of composers attached to that assignment. And you're going to go pick one of those composers, do some research, understand how they fit into that time period, and you can find out more details there. But this is going to be an overview so that you can get a good understanding of what the basic history is. So this is very, very shallow, not deep at all, and I'll try to keep it quick and short if I can. So let's get started. I will apologize if there's any computer or if there's any video glitching. I hope the audio stays true. There's a lot of stuff running on my slow computer here. It's not souped up at all, so I hope that it will still be okay. So, musical eras. There are 6 of them, and they have they've kind of been shifting and moving slowly over history as music historians continue to research and suggest things, and things become widely accepted. But in general, there are 6, and they might go by different names, and they also might go from slightly different years. The biggest thing to remember about these is that it's not as though in the year 500 they said, hey, everybody, let's start a new musical time period. What we're doing instead is now, and looking back at history and saying around this time, around the year 1600, something changed, something happened that fundamentally changed the sound of music, how music was made, how it was produced, and all those kinds of things. And so this is not them back in that time period figuring out how things are going, but instead it is us looking back. So, for example, with our first musical time period, this is called the chant time period. It was also called medieval, so it's chant or medieval, and you'll understand why when you hear the music. So, it is around the year 500 to 1450. So in the year 500, the Catholic Church in the Holy Roman Empire was really getting going, and they were really starting to make their own music and develop a liturgy to put in the church every week. And people would start to compose music and sing music for those performances. And the most important thing is they figured out a way to write it down. That's one of the biggest things that happened during the chant time period. Was our modern music notation with quarter notes, half notes was not developed until much, much later. So towards the end of this time, they started getting things that were similar to what we have today. So during the medieval and chant time period, music was very simple. We sing a lot more complex songs today, actually, even in our own choir, than they had back then. They were often from 1 to 4 parts. We're going to listen to a 1-part song and then also a 4-part song. It was only voices. We're actually going to hear a song that does have a musical drone in it, and that is essentially a drone that happens on do. It doesn't change off of that, and it's kind of like a primitive bagpipe that they would just refill the air and just keep that drone going. And it was most of the time, the vast majority of the time, only in church, and so it was the music of the church, which is mostly Latin, and it was performed in large cathedrals and massive spaces, and you will hear some of that. So with each of these time periods, I have a picture that goes along with each of them, and this first one you can see is not super lifelike. So especially compared to today, or like we can take a picture and it looks exactly like life. This picture here is not lifelike at all. In fact, I believe it's a tapestry that might have some paint on it as well. And so you can see that it's a picture of the mother, the Virgin Mary, and the baby Jesus. Their skin color is like weirdly golden. Jesus, apparently, he looks super young, but he has the dexterity to hold up 2 fingers. Like that they have halos around them. It's just not very realistic, and this is representative of things that they made to educate people in the church. And so as we progress, as music gets closer and closer to today, they start to discover how to depict things and to make them more realistic. So this one for now is just very simple. A couple things going on. It's also two-dimensional, all those kinds of things. So that represents the chant and time period era. Here's our first song. This is by Hildegard von Bingen, which is one of the few female composers that made their way into music history. I wish there were more, but that's just kind of unfortunately not how it is. So this is a chant song with one drone and just a choir of voices singing one voice part. Here it is. So there you have it. That is just a one-line chant song, again sung in Latin. Here's another one that is much further more developed. This one actually has 4 parts to it. And I'll let you watch it. Here we go. Here is an ancient musical manuscript. And they're going to sing Kyrie, and then keep that E vowel going for a very long time. So there are 4 parts. These are men, and most of the time men would be singing in the Catholic Church. If you needed a soprano voice, you'd actually go with a young boy whose voice hadn't changed yet. And this is in modern musical notation. It's not in the manuscript that you saw at the beginning of the video. So we'll go on. I hope that turned out well on the video, and it's not too glitchy like it is on my screen. We'll see how that goes. So the next one is called the Renaissance time period. It started around the year 1450 and went to the 1600. The big thing about the Renaissance was the invention of the printing press, and this got music into the hands of all kinds of different people. Not just books and those kind of things, but also music. They figured out how to print it so that the everyday person could purchase a piece of sheet music and then they could perform it in their own house. So now the big thing that happened was that everybody wanted to be educated, and they started to study things, and they rediscovered Greek literature. And everybody desired an education. Everybody wanted to learn how to read, how to write, how to make music, how to study art, and all those kinds of things. Essentially, it was the rebirth of the humanities. Especially with the study of the arts, music, architecture, Greek drama. Everything came from the resurrected Greek culture that they had discovered and unearthed that had been lost during the medieval times. So this is where our strand of popular music actually starts. When we get to talking about modern music and stuff you hear on the radio, that is going to be have its roots back here in the Renaissance time period, when people started to make songs that were not just for the church, that they were songs about everyday life. And they would compose things with lyrics that were in the modern vernacular, so it would be in Old English or in German, in French, and all those kinds of things. So here's a song. A crucial part of the next song is going to be, it's a bit more familiar to you probably, something that we might sing. I think it's a 5-part song, and in it there is a lyric that goes fa la 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 la, and that comes from the Renaissance time period. What they would do was they would have a little lyric of a quick little line, and the music, the lyrics are, "Now is the month of Maying, when merry lads are playing," and then they just sing fa la 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 la, fa la 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 la, and then they go back and do some more lyrics, and then back to the fa la las. So "Deck the Halls" is a modern song that has fa la 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 in it, and that actually comes from the Renaissance time period. So here is a bit more of a fun song, not a song necessarily for church, and here it is. So you see that fa la 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 happens a lot. Stop that song there. The lyrics that would continue is each with his bonny lass the nymphs tread upon the grass. It's essentially a song just about finding the girl that you like and taking her for a walk. That it's not a song for church, and that was just a fun way that composers would start to write songs. So that is the Renaissance. The picture here, you do notice, is a bit more realistic. They discovered lighting. You can see shadows underneath. It's very rudimentary, as the shadows are pretty much underneath the people. But in the top, you see architecture. You also see that it's smaller as people are further away from the perspective of the viewer. They get smaller, closer things are bigger. All these things that they started to discover and figure out how to depict, the vanishing point. Here's the Baroque time period. The Baroque time period, again after the Renaissance, was when humanism, or the humanities, the desire to be educated, learn about English, literature, art, all that kind of thing, it was flourishing. It was in its heyday. Things became very elaborate. You can see from this painting itself that there's a ton of stuff going on. And when it first popped up, your eyes probably bounced all over the place. But this simply really is just another picture of the manger scene. You have towards the right-hand side a Virgin Mary again and the baby Jesus. There's some old angry dude over on the left. There's some Roman soldiers in there. You see the Magi. There's some drastic shadows in the upper right hand corner. There's shepherds in the background. There's just all kinds of stuff going on for you to look at, and they just kind of went crazy with it. So in music, that is reflected in the fact that sometimes it's hard to understand where the melody is. The music starts, never stops, and then you don't have a time to collect yourself and breathe before the next musical idea or the next phrase hits you. So here's a song from Johann Sebastian Bach. It's called The Little Fugue in G minor. A fugue is essentially like a round, and so it's going to play a melody, and then that melody is going to come back around again, but both of those melodies then will keep going the entire time. The big idea here in Baroque was that every part could be its own melody, and so even if you have an entire orchestra full of tons of instruments playing, each of their individual parts could sound like a melody on its own. Same thing would happen in choir. And so that is all about the Baroque time period, and here is the Little Fugue by Bach. Here's the second melody. But the other melody is continuing. And we'll stop it there since it's repeated. So these songs would take up a lot of black ink because there was so much music going on.